I have this part of the speech where I have the kids make a mental health plan for themselves. And it's like, one way I'm going to take care of myself is by doing this. This was a place for them to put their own personalized self-care practices in. And one of the boys was like, I put feeding our cows. Some of the kids around him started laughing at him. They're like, that's not self-care. And I was like, that's 100% self-care. If he gets something out of that and he's nurturing something else, maybe in a time where he's struggling with nurturing himself, like that's a beautiful practice. Hi, friends.
Hi, it's so good to see you again.
Good to see y'all. I was going to wear my Doing My Best shirt, but I decided to do this one instead.
All good. We need them all. We need all the messages.
I was at the library wearing my Doing My Best shirt, and this like older black lady was like, "Baby, me too," when she walked by me, and I was like, "Oh." She didn't even stop to talk to me. She just like yelled it and kept walking, and I thought it was precious.
That's awesome.
We just watched your interview from the Today Show.
Oh, you guys haven't seen it?
I saw it a while back,
a long
but
time
like
ago, maybe.
rewatching it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is so good. Like you are just like
You're a gift to the
seriously.
world.
Wow.
It was it was a different time. That's like right when things started to get really tough. The Today Show was a great opportunity, and it just brought on a lot. And I'm kind of in the recovery mode. It really took a toll on me. And then I just did this huge speaking tour. I did 22 speeches in 6 weeks. And and came home and was like, why am I so tired? Why am I so sad? And then it's been a journey for sure. It's been a journey for sure.
I got so excited to kind of do an interview with you because we just need more men being vulnerable, being vocal about mental health, being vocal about their journeys. And I guess I'm just curious if you want to start by just kind of giving us a bit of your background and kind of what made you this brave, confident man that is so vulnerable and open online about kind of mental health.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I've ever said this out loud before, but it's interesting to see how people perceive us versus how we perceive ourselves. I think what's helped me the most kind of step into the vulnerable space of sharing about this stuff is kids expressing the need for it and expressing the want to see more of this kind of stuff from someone that they want to learn from. I am still learning how to take care of myself. Like I said, I did 22 speeches in 6 weeks, and all of those speeches were around like when a time in my life where I was suicidal and my depression was really bad. And so even understanding that the vulnerability comes at a cost to me, and how do I take care of myself, knowing that this is like the main thing that I'm doing, has been a big part of my learning journey recently. I just started to look online, and it felt like everybody was just doing this like, look how great I am, and you could be great too if you did these things. And I know behind all of those great things are low moments and struggles, and that we don't share those. So you have all these young people who are going through normal struggling, or unfortunately going through suffering, who think it's not normal for them to feel this way, or that they're not capable of doing these great things. So I realized like I would never back down from talking about the difficult parts. I can be grateful and excited and motivated about the experience, and also talk about like where it takes me mentally and emotionally. So instead of saying like, look at how great my life is, your life could be great if you do these things too. It's like, yeah, sometimes I have really great things, and life can be wonderful, and also sometimes life can be really tough, and I want to show both sides of those. I was at a high school, and I was doing my presentation about struggling and suffering and the difference between these two things. And there was this young man who was completely locked in. Anytime I felt like I was losing the room, I would literally just look at him to be like, all right, this kid is listening. If one kid takes something from this, I'm happy. But afterwards, he came up and he talked with me, and he just shared that it was the first time he had seen like strength in vulnerability, and that he was kind of suffering on his own, but because of what he believed around vulnerability, especially from where he's from and the kind of groups that he hangs out with and how his family is. He would always beat himself up for feeling bad about things, and that was huge. It was a huge moment, not just for me, but I think for him to have a chance to be like, okay, this is someone I consider to be a strong person, and they're talking about something that has been told to me is not strong in the past, but now that I'm seeing it from this new light, that it's okay, and I'm going to ask for help, and I'm going to do what I need to do to take care of myself, because that's a new way of thinking about being strong.
That's really beautiful. And we do need more.
Well, he's up on my wall. I redid my wall recently, and I had to put him up there because it was just a big. I needed a reminder as I'm in this really difficult season. Self care has looked very different for me than it has in the past. This is like a self care renaissance
Yeah.
a little bit, but just needing to like remind myself of currently where I'm at and what I'm trying to do, and their faces, these young people, are the ones that remind me of like why I choose to do the work that I
Yeah.
do.
I bet you a lot of them like may not have seen a man who is able to be vulnerable and that being normalized. And the fact that you're putting yourself into this work just speaks volumes to, it's a very selfless position to put yourself in, because of course you do gain things back from sharing, but like you're putting yourself out there so that these individuals can feel like they can put themselves, if they need help, they can ask for help. And so just thank you for doing that. And it's really brave work. You also shared kind of being on this 6-week speaking tour and how much energetic and how much vulnerability it could drain someone. And if you're having a hard day, just like any person could have a hard day, how do you show up on those days to stand on that stage? And I don't want to say put on a performance, because you are extremely authentic and this is authentic work for you, but it's possible that you have a hard day. So how do you show up on those days?
For me, it's not about getting on stage that feels hard. It was about how do I take care of myself outside of it, and doing public figure work is tough. There's a hard kind of separation. Like the boundaries need to be there in terms of Donofriend and Donovan. I pushed myself so hard that Donofriend is
Mm.
thriving and like Donovan is like barely surviving. And so now I have to understand that Donofriend doesn't exist without Donovan. And so I have to take care of
Mm.
myself in order to be able to show up in the work and also not have it drain me completely.
I thought it was interesting how you mentioned, like, you know, it's easy to show up for others, but it's hard to show up for ourselves. It's easy to kind of like say these messages and we mean it, we know it's true, but then there's those hangups when it comes to actually like doing the check-in work, the self-care work, the giving ourselves that same grace. Has that been a skill that's always been there? And I guess, what does self-care for Donovan look like today and when you're going through a tough time?
No, God, no, it's not. I went to a therapist in my late 20s, and she would talk about the way I talked about myself. That allowed me more recently to think about self care as more than just these practices that we do. I think a lot of times when young people hear self care, that it's like very classic, like go for a walk or write in your journal, and those are great practices. But I think an obstacle for me, and I see in a lot of other people, is that if we have self limiting beliefs about ourself or the world or these concepts like help and support and vulnerability, like no amount of self-care practices are ever going to really feel good for us. My self-care was more about challenging ideas that I had about myself that were preventing me from getting the care that I needed. Beating myself up didn't help me. It made me stay in bed longer and feel miserable. I think I didn't realize how much self-limiting
Mm.
beliefs around ourselves in the world can really impact the way that we're able to take care
Wow.
of ourselves.
Makes me wonder, like, you have so much interaction with the young generation, and they have social media, so they have connections all the time, right? But not real connections. So I guess I'm wondering if you're seeing any themes from the students that you interact with. Like, is there anything that you're seeing where they're struggling with their mental health, maybe in similar ways, or if loneliness comes up at all? Like,
The lack of resources makes it difficult for young people to take care of themselves. And then we push this narrative of the pull yourself up by the bootstraps, which we see in the business world, we see in like the motivational world, but we're also seeing it in the self-help world. And what I'm trying to tell people is part of self-help sometimes means having a support system. It doesn't mean you have to do it by yourself. And I think about what it may feel like for a young person who doesn't have friends, who maybe doesn't have a relationship where they can talk to their parents or their guardians about that stuff. And I think about how much of a disservice that is to them to not have community support.
I would love to, if you feel okay sharing. You mentioned kind of like your self care is looking differently in this season. Like, would you be comfortable sharing kind of some of what that self care is right now?
Yeah, it's been a little bit I just started to say, like, first of all, evaluating self-care practices, I have kind of two criteria, which is this causing me harm or is this causing harm to other people? And if it's not, then I think it's great. I've just been doing random things that have like made me feel better. And one of the most interesting ones is there's this song by Mama Cass. I think it's called Make Your Own Kind of Music. You know what I'm talking about? That older
Not
make
song.
from
your own
that.
kind of music.
I don't know. I don't know where I saw it, but recently, for the past 2 weeks, every day I've just played it on the speaker and have been
Sure.
singing it. And there's some days where I'm literally like, even if nobody tells me to. And then there's some days where I have this burst of energy, which has been great. But in the morning, it's been a practice. Just like things that
Okay.
feel nice. You know what I mean? Things that make me feel something. And what's different is this time it wasn't about like these things are supposed to make me feel better. It was just listening to myself and saying like what actually is going to make me feel better. And when I started to do that, some of the ways that I take care of myself that were not helpful, those things started to kind of go away as well. And so instead of being this firm kind of like you have to do this, it has to look like this, don't do this, it was just like what feels good.
Yeah, because it also sounds like you're also building momentum. Like, it's okay if the only thing you did that day was listen to that song and you smiled once. That's okay. Like, you
Mhm.
don't have to have a whole to-do list that you finished for it to
Mhm.
be an okay day. And so I love that you're building momentum with things that maybe make your inner child happy, or just,
Mhm.
make Donnie happy in the way that he deserves to be. And it's not happy, it's uh, moments of joy. Even when we are in the most depressed, there's still moments of joy that we can find in our day if we
Mhm.
look for them.
We never want to be prescriptive about
Mhm.
self-care because like you
Mhm.
mentioned, like the
Yeah.
emphasis on the is on the self part. Like self-care looks different for everyone, and self-care can look different every single day. What works one
Mhm.
day may not work another day because you're just in a different headspace or your
Yep.
body's sore or whatever. And it's like it does go back to that kind of like that checking in process, the self-compassion of like,
Mhm.
what am I needing today?
I have this part of the speech where I have the kids make a mental health plan for themselves. And there's two sides of it because I encourage struggling, but I also think we need to take care of ourselves while we're struggling. Because if we don't take care of ourselves in the struggle, it often turns into personal suffering. But the high school presentation has them come up with a plan. And it's like, one way I'm going to take care of myself is by doing this. And this was a place for them to put their own personalized self care practices in. And then at the end, there's a large group of students talking to me. And one of the boys was like, I put feeding our cows. And some of the kids around him started laughing at him and they're like, that's not self-care. And I was like, that's 100% self-care. Like if he gets something out of that and he's nurturing something else, maybe in a time where he's struggling with nurturing himself, like that's a beautiful practice. But I never would have seen feed your cow as like a self-care practice anywhere before, but this young person immediately knew. He was like, yeah, when things are tough, I go out there and I spend time with our family cows and I feed them and it makes me feel
That's
better.
so sweet.
And I'm like, that's a
Wow.
self-care practice. That's like a beautiful self-care
Oh,
practice to have.
I love hearing like how the students share with you kind of their experiences and what they do for self-care. But is there anything that you would say to parents about how they could better talk about mental health with their kids? And is there anything teachers can do in their classrooms to have these conversations? Because it sounds like these students are very receptive. They want to have the conversation.
Yeah.
Uh,
I I don't know if this will make sense. I feel like we are living, and I haven't heard this talked about a lot, maybe because I haven't found the right spot, but I there's this weird like knowledge thing happening right now where the older people are not the keepers of knowledge anymore in terms of like society, but just having a proactive conversation and being like, I'm learning about these things, can you share your experiences, like is this helpful when I do this, what is not helpful. I think just asking young people how we can be of help to them and what is helpful is a really great practice. And I hope with this documentary that we're doing, we just had like a huge shift around it. I'll tell you all more about it later, but I was like, I don't want to be the keeper of knowledge for this documentary. I want to talk to young people about their experiences. All of my work in the past 2 years has been tailored around what young people have shared with me. Here's what we want to work on. Great. I'm going to make content around that, specifically come from kids. Normalizing and giving language to messaging is really important. One of the main skills I talk with young people around is self-talk, and a lot of negative self-talk comes from society. It's things that they've heard, that they've internalized. So it's not just families, but also friends and just a larger picture. And I love the work that you all are doing because the messaging, I think, in a really safe and anonymous way, gives people access to language that they can use with themselves. You remember the first day I met you? Do you remember how freaked out I was? Because I was like, everything I'm trying to say is here. I was losing my mind. I was telling people about it forever, because you just don't see that.
that was such a fun interaction, and just like meeting your energy for the first time was
Right.
so
Very special.
memorable, and yeah, you are a gift.
You know it. I felt so like high and mighty. I like called friends afterwards, and I was like, I'm really gonna help this little brand take off. And then you all were like, we love that. 1.2 million followers. Oh yeah, I had some crow for dinner
I
that night.
mean,
That's for
you are
sure.
helping us. I mean, those are it's all just numbers. The real work is in these conversations and hoping that it
Connections.
it lands for one person. I guess kind of the question I wanted to ask, which I apologize in advance because it's like one of those where it's like whatever, but you know, say a kid is struggling, comes to you, and you can only say kind of like one message to them,
Mhm.
and it's you have a minute with them. Like, what are you saying?
I have this moment a lot, and it is hard. I have to, oh man, I have to like, I had to forgive myself a lot. I was struggling with it because young people would come up, and I could see that they needed
Mm.
it, and that they could use me in their life, and to understand that I am limited and that I am not the person that can do that for them is really tough. And so a lot of times if young people share, I just tell them how happy I am that they're there. To just think about asking for help, one of the biggest messages I try to share with young people is that asking for help is a sign that you care about yourself.
If people do want to hear more from you, if they want to support you, what's the best way to do so?
Social media, I am Donofriend everywhere. If you type in Donofriend, it's just me. But I'm on YouTube, I'm on Twitch, I'm on way too many platforms. That's the best way. And if you are a teacher or administrator or a parent, I am booking for speeches across the country. I'm always willing to work with schools, get connected, and reach out to me. But I am on a little bit of a break. So if you message me on social media, it may be a while before I get back to you, but I will when I can.
I just want to reflect that you've done so much work on yourself, and Donnie should be so proud to see how who Donofriend is, and who Donovan is. You just are a great example for men, for mental health advocates, for people of color. And it's not that you have to represent all of those people, but it is really nice to see that these conversations can happen and that they are safe and they are very much important. So thank you so much.
It's a huge honor to be connected with you all. And I feel like the alignment is something that brings a lot to both worlds. It's really nice to have that reflected back to me from people who I actually care about and who I know understand the work.